The sound of the paper tearing was louder than any gunshot I had ever heard on the training grounds. It was the sound of my heart, my life, my 3 years of devotion, being shredded into meaningless confetti. I stood frozen in his living room watching the man I loved, Liam Hayes, destroy the physical proof of our union with his own hands. "It's over, Chloe." His voice was a shard of ice, so cold it burned. "Sign the papers and get out." Snow lashed against the window panes of the military compound house, a fitting backdrop for the desolation inside me. I clutched the folded square of paper hidden behind my back, the secret I had carried for weeks, my nails digging half-moons into my palm. The diagnosis. The one that had filled me with a dread he would never understand. Now it felt like a pathetic, useless shield against his contempt. I forced my eyes to his face, the handsome, strong features I had traced with my fingers so many times. The uniform with its single star and 2 bars on the epaulettes seemed to mock me. He was Colonel Liam Hayes, a rising star. And I was just Chloe Reed, the woman he was discarding. "Maya's back," he said, and the name hung in the air between us, toxic and final. Maya. His childhood sweetheart. The one who had chosen the factory director's son over a lowly soldier stationed in the countryside. The one who had come crawling back the moment he earned his rank and prestige. A bitter laugh escaped my lips, tears welling but refusing to fall. "Liam, have you forgotten who pulled you out of the mud and despair of that village? Who stood by you for 3 long years? Who defended you when the entire military district questioned your integrity?" "Chloe, don't," he snapped, his jaw tight. "Don't bring up the past. Maya had her reasons back then." Her reasons. The laugh was hysterical now. Her reason was that she married another man for money. Her reason is that she's a social climber who only wants you now that you're someone. That's enough. His fist came down on the wooden table, making the teacups rattle violently. "I didn't come here to rehash ancient history. Sign the divorce papers. You can have the apartment in the city. I'll give you 500 yuan. Consider it compensation." Compensation. 500 yuan to erase 3 years of my youth, my love, every sacrifice, every cold night spent waiting for him, every battle fought at his side. I stared at his emotionless face and I felt something inside me turn to stone, cold and hard. "Fine," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'll sign." I picked up the pen. It felt heavy, like I was signing away my own soul. I scrawled my name, Chloe Reed, across the bottom of the document, the strokes quick and bold, a final act of defiance. As the ink dried, the door creaked open. She walked in as if on cue, wrapped in a stylish wool coat that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. "Maya." She slid her arm through Liam's with a practiced ease. "Liam, is everything taken care of?" she asked, her voice a sickeningly sweet simper. Her eyes, however, darted to me, laced with a venomous triumph. Liam's entire demeanor softened. The hard lines around his mouth relaxed. "Yeah, it's done." Only then did Maya deign to look at me directly, a smug smile curling her perfectly painted lips. "Chloe Reed, thank you for stepping aside. Liam and we were always meant to be." I watched them standing there together, a perfect, horrible picture. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. A strange, numb calm settled over me. I quietly gathered the few things I had brought with me into a small bag and walked out of the house I had foolishly believed would be my forever home. The wind outside was a physical assault, the snow stinging my cheeks. I wrapped my thin old coat tighter around myself, but the cold was inside me now, seeping into my bones. I wandered aimlessly through the streets of the compound, then beyond its gates into the anonymous city. The world was a blur of white and gray. I had nowhere to go. No one to turn to. "Maybe I'll just freeze to death out here," I thought with a detached sort of interest. It would be easier. Just as my legs began to feel like lead, a black Jeep pulled up beside me, its tires crunching on the frozen slush. The window rolled down, revealing a sharply defined, brutally handsome face I knew all too well. It was a face that inspired fear and respect in equal measure. Kale Vance. Liam's sworn enemy. The most feared and ruthless man in the entire military district. "Get in," he commanded, his voice even colder than the storm raging around us. I hesitated for only a second. What did I have to lose? My pride was already ashes. My future was a blank white void. I opened the door and slid into the passenger seat. The warmth inside the car was a shock to my system, a stark contrast to the emptiness in my soul. He didn't look at me, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Where to? I don't know, I whispered, watching the familiar streets of my old life blur past the window. Kale said nothing more. The silence in the car was thick but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two predators sizing each other up, or perhaps two wounded animals seeking shelter. He drove with a focused intensity, and eventually the car stopped in front of a small, detached two-story villa, its lights glowing warmly against the oppressive gloom. "We're here," he said, cutting the engine. I blinked. "Where is this?" "Pie House." My voice rose in confusion. "Why did you bring me to your place?" Finally he turned his head. His eyes, a deep, intense shade of obsidian, locked onto mine, and I felt a jolt like a static shock. There was an unnerving intelligence in that gaze, a perception that seemed to see right through my fragile composure. "Chloe Reed," he said, his tone flat and utterly serious. "Marry me." I froze. The world tilted on its axis. Had the cold finally addled my brain? What did you say?" "I said marry me," he repeated, each word deliberate and clear. "I know you just divorced Liam Hayes. Marry me and I'll help you get the revenge you deserve." I stared at him, searching his face for any sign of mockery, any hint that this was a cruel joke. There was none. His expression was deadly serious. "Why me?" I managed to stammer. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Because you're the only person I've ever seen put Liam Hayes in his place in front of a room full of senior officers. And because," he added, the smile fading, "I also need a wife." The pieces clicked into place. The pressure from his family. The need for a respectable front. This wasn't a rescue, it was a transaction. A business proposal from one damaged soul to another. And in that moment, it was the most sensible offer I had ever received. Drowning in the pain of the past was not an option. Seizing a weapon, even a dangerous one like Kale Vance, was. I looked him straight in those unnerving dark eyes. "All right," I said, my voice clear and firm. "I'll marry you." He seemed momentarily taken aback by my swift agreement. A flicker of surprise, then a low chuckle. The sound was rough, but it transformed his face, like the first crack of sunlight through a frozen landscape. "Good," he said. "If it's inconvenient tonight, there's a guest house nearby. Tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. Civil Affairs Bureau." "Okay," I nodded. The next day I stood at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Kale was already there, leaning against his jeep in casual clothes, a cigarette dangling from his fingers. He looked more like a dangerous underworld kingpin than a military captain. When he saw me, he stubbed out the cigarette and walked over. "Let's go," he said, his tone all business. The process was bureaucratic and swift. In a matter of minutes, we walked back out into the daylight, a little red booklet in my hand that declared me Mrs. Chloe Vance. I had a new name and a new husband I barely knew. "From today you are Mrs. Vance," Kale said, pressing a cold metal key into my palm. "That villa is our home now." I clutched the key, a swirl of conflicting emotions making me dizzy. Just then a familiar sedan pulled up beside us. My blood ran cold. The window rolled down to reveal Liam's stunned, pale face. "Chloe? You too?" His eyes dropped to our joined hands and his pupils contracted to pinpricks. Kale's arm slid around my waist, pulling me firmly against his side. "Just as you see, Hayes," he said, his voice calm but laced with open provocation. "Chloe is my wife now." Liam's face went through a series of terrifying transformations. Shock, disbelief, and finally, a rage so pure it seemed to bleach the color from his skin. "Impossible," he choked out. "When did this happen?" "Just now," I said, finding a strength I didn't know I possessed. I slipped out of Kale's embrace, reached into my bag and pulled out the brand new marriage certificate. I waved the little red book in front of him like a flag of victory. "See for yourself, Colonel Hayes. Are we even now?" He stared at the certificate as if he could set it ablaze with the heat of his glare. In the passenger seat beside him, Maya's face was a mask of fury and shock, her perfect composure shattered. "Chloe," she said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "How could you do this to yourself? Captain Vance, he's a..." She trailed off as if the word was too terrible to speak. "A madman." I finished for her, my voice colder than the winter air. At least this madman didn't throw his wife out into the snow for the woman who abandoned him. Maya's face flushed a blotchy red. You. Enough. Liam cut her off, his voice a low, dangerous growl. His eyes, when they met mine, were a turbulent sea of confusion and something else. Was it a flicker of pain? Chloe, have you really thought this through? Do you have any idea what you've gotten yourself into? I've never been clearer about anything in my life, I said, and I meant it. I turned to Kale, offering him a bright, dazzling smile that was entirely for Liam's benefit. Kale, darling, let's go home. Sure, sweetheart. Kale's response was smooth as silk. He reached out and ruffled my hair with an affection that felt startlingly genuine. He opened the car door for me, shielding me from the biting wind with his body, a gesture of possession and care that was not lost on Liam. From beginning to end, he never once glanced back at my ex-husband. As the jeep sped away, leaving them in our dust, the false smile melted from my face. I slumped in the seat, the adrenaline draining away and leaving me exhausted and hollow. Kale didn't speak until we were back at the villa. He gave me a brief tour. The first floor was open plan, modern and minimalist, but surprisingly warm with its dark wood and soft lighting. The study was lined with books, a surprising touch for a man known for his brutality on the training field. The second floor is the bedrooms, he said, leading the way up. Pick whichever one you like. I'll just take the guest room, I replied quickly. He stopped and turned to me, his expression unyielding. You're the lady of this house. You'll take the master bedroom. We're in a contract marriage, I argued, feeling a flush of embarrassment. This seems unnecessary. We are married, he stated plainly. And we will look the part. Especially in front of others. We will be a loving husband and wife. Understood. I nodded, too tired to argue further. Understood. That night I lay on the enormous, impossibly soft bed in the master bedroom. It felt alien, too large and too empty. I tossed and turned, the events of the day replaying on a loop behind my eyelids. But it wasn't Liam's betrayed face or Maya's smugness that haunted me the most. It was the feel of Kale's arm around my waist, the scent of his cologne, clean and sharp like sandalwood and frost, that lingered in my senses. And beneath my pillow, the diagnosis crinkled with every movement, a constant anxious reminder of the secret I carried. Should I tell him? Would he, like Liam, see me as damaged goods? A flawed product in our business arrangement? Just as my thoughts began to spiral into a panic, a soft knock sounded at the door. You awake? It was Kale's voice, low and steady. I shot up in bed, my heart hammering. Before I could form a response, the door opened and he walked in holding a cup of steaming milk. Drink this, he said, placing it on the nightstand. It'll help you sleep. Thank you, I murmured, pulling the blankets higher. He didn't leave. He just stood there, a tall, silent silhouette in the dim light, watching me. His gaze was so deep, so unreadable, it felt like a physical weight. Something on your mind? He asked suddenly. His perception was unnerving. I flinched, nearly knocking over the cup. No. Nothing. Chloe, he said, and his voice was surprisingly gentle. We're married now. If something is bothering you, you can talk to me. I looked into his eyes, and for the first time I saw no calculation, no cold strategy. Just a quiet, patient sincerity. It was that, more than anything, that broke down my defenses. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. I reached under the pillow and pulled out the crumpled paper. My hand trembled as I handed it to him. I might not be able to have children. He took the diagnosis, his face impassive in the moonlight. He scanned it quickly, his brow barely furrowing. There was no gasp of shock, no look of pity or disgust. So, he said finally, his voice still calm. Liam divorced you because of this? I shook my head vehemently, tears pricking my eyes. He doesn't know. I never told him. This seemed to surprise him. His eyes lifted to meet mine. Why not? What difference would it have made? I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. His heart was already with Maya. This would have just been another excuse. Another reason for him to see me as inadequate. Kale was silent for a long time, just looking at me. He folded the paper with deliberate care and handed it back to me. Get some sleep, he said, his tone firm yet kind. Don't overthink it. If the sky falls, I'll be the one to hold it up for you. Then he turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. I sat there, clutching the diagnosis, the warmth from the milk cup seeping into my cold fingers. Watching his retreating back, a strange foreign warmth spread through my chest, thawing a tiny piece of the ice that had encased my heart. For the first time since Liam tore up our certificate, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't despair. It was something dangerously close to hope. The warmth from Kale's unexpected kindness lasted through the night, a small, steady flame in the vast cold of my new reality. I actually slept, a deep, dreamless sleep that felt like a healing balm. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the unfamiliar window, painting gold on the wooden floor. I came downstairs to find Kale in the kitchen, a domestic scene so surreal I had to blink twice. He moved with the same efficient grace he probably used disassembling a rifle. "Hurry up and eat before it gets cold," he said, nodding toward the small table where steamed buns and a thermos of soy milk sat. A wave of embarrassment washed over me. I should be the one doing this. The cooking, I mean. He placed another bun on a plate and pushed it toward my seat. "No need. I'm a grown man. I'm not going to make you wait on me hand and foot." He said it so matter-of-factly as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. It was a stark contrast to Liam, who had always expected his home to be a perfectly run refuge, with me as its chief attendant. I smiled, a real, unforced smile, and didn't argue. We ate in a comfortable silence, the only sound the morning birds outside. After breakfast he got ready to leave for the base, shrugging on his uniform jacket. Just as his hand touched the doorknob he paused and turned back. "Oh right," he said, his tone casual as if mentioning the weather. "My mother's coming for a visit in a few days. Just giving you a heads up." My chopsticks froze mid-air. "Your mother?" He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Yeah. If she says anything harsh, don't take it to heart." His dark eyes met mine, steady and sure. "I've got you." I managed a weak nod, but a nest of snakes began to writhe in my stomach. Kale's mother. Eleanor Vance. Her reputation preceded her. A dragon lady of the highest order, a socialite known for her sharp tongue and even sharper ambitions for her son. And I, the surprised, divorced, and utterly unsuitable daughter-in-law, was about to be served up on a platter. The next 3 days were a slow burn anxiety. I tried to settle into the villa, but every creak of the floorboards made me jump. When the day arrived, I was in the courtyard, hanging out the heavy winter bedding to air, trying to find solace in the simple physical task. The gate swung open with a force that rattled the hinges. She stood there, a vision of imposing elegance in a tailored wool suit, her hair perfectly coiffed. Her eyes, the same obsidian as Kale's but without their hidden warmth, swept over me and the courtyard with undisguised judgment. "So you're Chloe Reed," she said, her voice like chipped ice. I put down the bedding, forcing my hands not to tremble. "Hello, Mrs. Vance. I'm Chloe." I offered a polite smile, hoping to defuse the situation. "Who are you calling Mrs. Vance?" she scoffed, a cold, dismissive sound. "I'm not your elder. Don't try to flatter me with false familiarity." My smile froze and died on my lips. The air grew thick with her disdain. "Where's Kale?" she demanded, her gaze sweeping past me as if I were a piece of furniture. "He's at the base," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "The base. The base?" she huffed, her fury igniting. "All he cares about is that damn base. And now, just to marry a divorced woman like you, he doesn't even care to be home to greet his own mother." "Mom, what are you doing here?" Kale's voice cut through the tension like a knife. He stood at the gate, a netted bag full of oranges and pears in his hand. He must have come home early. The moment Eleanor Vance saw him, her fury found a new target. "If I hadn't come, you'd be completely out of control by now," she snapped, advancing on him. "Kale, I'm telling you, I do not approve of this woman. She is not welcome in the Vance family." "My marriage is my own decision," Kale replied, his voice firm as granite. He set the fruit down on the stone table in the courtyard with a definitive thud. "Chloe is the woman I've chosen to be my wife. No one can change that. Not even you." Mrs. Vance actually trembled with rage. "So, you're going to oppose your own mother for her?" "I'm not opposing you, Mom," Kale said, his tone softening a fraction, a masterful display of diplomacy. "Chloe is a good person. Once you get to know her, you'll see that too." "I don't care," she shrieked, now fully in the throes of a tantrum. She pointed a trembling finger between him and me. It's either her or me. If she stays, I'm gone. I felt a massive headache blooming behind my eyes. This was a disaster. I was tearing his family apart before our marriage was even a week old. And then, as if summoned by the drama, the noisy sound of gossiping voices floated into the courtyard. A group of military wives had gathered just outside the gate, led by the compound's most notorious busybody, Mrs. Chin. Well, if it isn't Mrs. Vance. What a rare visit. Mrs. Chin chirped, her eyes gleaming with avid curiosity. Eleanor's expression turned thunderous. What are you all looking at? Get lost. But Mrs. Chin, emboldened by the audience, didn't flinch. She waltzed right in, a grin plastered on her face. Don't be upset, Mrs. Vance. We just heard that Kale got himself a new bride and came to take a little look. As she spoke, her eyes raked over me from head to toe. Oh my, so this is the new bride. She's certainly pretty, but why does she look so familiar? She's Liam Hayes' ex-wife, one of the other women whispered, not quietly enough. What? Liam's ex-wife? Mrs. Chen's eyes widened into saucers. Toway. Weren't they just divorced the other day? And now she's already married to Captain Vance? That's fast. She let out a low whistle. Wow, this woman sure is something else. The whispers swarmed around me like wasps, each one a tiny, stinging needle. Shameless. Cunning. A social climber. I could feel the words, even unspoken. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, my knuckles white. I felt the color drain from my face, my carefully constructed composure cracking under the assault. Enough. Kale's roar was like a clap of thunder, silencing the courtyard instantly. He moved to stand protectively in front of me, his body a solid wall between me and the gossiping women. His glare was so icy it could have frozen hell over. Chloe Vance is my wife, he said, his voice low and deadly. You have no right to stand on my property and gossip about her. If I hear another word from any of you, I will personally ensure your families are transferred to the most remote posting I can find. Is that clear? Mrs. Chin flinched, her smug grin vanishing, replaced by pure fear. See here, Captain Vance, we were just joking. Leave. Now. They didn't need to be told twice. Mrs. Chin and her cronies turned tail and fled, practically tripping over each other in their haste. Even Eleanor Vance was stunned into silence by the raw, protective fury her son had displayed. If you've got nothing else to say, Mom, Kale said, his voice returning to a cold, flat calm. Then please go home. Chloe and I have something to discuss. His mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. With one last furious glare in my direction, she spun on her heel and stormed out of the courtyard, the gate slamming shut behind her. Peace returned, fragile and heavy. Kale turned to me. The anger had vanished from his face, replaced by a quiet concern. Did they scare you? He asked. I shook my head, my voice a little unsteady. No. Good. He reached out, and with a gentleness that belied his previous ferocity, he brushed a wind-blown strand of hair from my cheek. His fingers were warm against my cold skin. Don't be afraid. As long as I'm here, no one will dare bully you. Looking into his serious, unwavering eyes, my heart did something strange and entirely unexpected. It didn't just skip a beat, it felt like it turned over completely. The nest of snakes in my stomach settled, soothed by the simple, powerful conviction in his promise. He wasn't just protecting a business partner. He was protecting me. The confrontation at the courtyard gate was the spark that lit the fuse. News of our marriage and the dramatic scene with Kale's mother spread through the military compound like a wildfire fanned by a gale. I was no longer just Chloe Reed, the discarded ex-wife. I was Chloe Vance, the shameless woman who had ensnared the formidable Captain Vance barely moments after her divorce. The whispers followed me everywhere. I heard them at the communal water tap, saw them in the averted glances and poorly concealed stares when I went to the small commissary. She must be something in bed. She's using him to get back at Liam. Poor Captain Vance, tricked by a pretty face. He'll toss her out soon enough. I told myself I didn't care. Their opinions were meaningless. I had survived Liam's betrayal. I could survive a few catty remarks. But the truth was each whispered word was a tiny paper cut, and by the end of the day I felt raw and bleeding. Kale of course noticed. He was far more perceptive than anyone gave him credit for. When he came home from work that evening, he didn't bring up the rumors. Instead, he walked through the door holding a large, greasy paper bag that filled the small villa with the irresistible aroma of roasted meat. "Brought us a treat," he announced, placing the bag on the table. "A whole roast duck, glistening and golden." I managed a small smile. "It smells amazing." But my appetite was non-existent. The gossip was a rock in my stomach. He sat down beside me, his gaze intent. "What's wrong?" When I didn't answer immediately, he added, his voice softer, "Still upset about the rumors?" I shook my head, then sighed, my shoulders slumping. My silence was an answer in itself. "Chloe," he said, his eyes locking with mine, demanding my attention. "People will always talk. Their mouths belong to them and they'll say whatever they want. We just need to live our lives well. Their noise is irrelevant." "But I started, the words catching in my throat. "But I'm dragging your name through the mud. But I'm making you a subject of ridicule." "No buts," he cut in, his tone leaving no room for argument. A faint, exasperated smile touched his lips. "You have to trust that your husband is perfectly capable of protecting you and his own reputation." "Your husband?" The word sent a strange shiver through me. "Thank you, Kale." "Dummy," he chuckled, and then he did something that shocked me. He reached out and ruffled my hair, the gesture so casually affectionate it stole my breath. "Now eat before it gets cold. It won't taste as good later." The simple act, the warmth in his touch, broke through the chill of my anxiety. I nodded, picked up my chopsticks and took a piece of the duck. It was perfectly crispy, the meat tender and flavorful. Maybe it was his comfort, or maybe I was just finally allowing myself to be hungry, but with each bite my mood gradually lifted. The rock in my stomach began to dissolve. In the days that followed, we settled into a quiet, comfortable rhythm. Kale was a creature of habit, leaving for the base and returning at almost the exact same time each day. Our life together was a far cry from the dramatic passion and subsequent coldness of my marriage to Liam. This was peaceful. And in that peace I began to see the real Kale Vance, the man behind the legend of the madman. He wasn't cold or heartless. He was reserved, a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He remembered that I liked roasted chestnuts, and would appear one evening with a small warm bag of them, handing it to me without a word. A week later, when cramps doubled me over, he didn't offer empty sympathy. He just quietly prepared a cup of brown sugar water and placed it in my hands. One night, I fell asleep on the sofa reading. I woke up hours later in the dark, disoriented, only to find a soft blanket tucked carefully around me. The scent of his sandalwood cologne lingered on it. He must have come home, seen me sleeping, and done that before retiring to his own room. My heart, little by little, began to melt in the warmth of his quiet care. I found myself starting to listen for the sound of his jeep pulling into the courtyard in the evening, a sense of anticipation fluttering in my chest. I began to miss the faint, clean scent of tobacco that clung to his clothes. I didn't know if this was love. It was too soon, too complicated. But I knew one thing for sure. This man, with his steady presence and unspoken devotion, was becoming essential. I was growing accustomed to him, to us. Just when I thought our fragile new life might find its footing in this quiet understanding, an uninvited guest shattered the peace. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for lunch, when a shadow fell across the doorway. I looked up and my blood ran cold. Liam stood there. He looked terrible. Thinner, his uniform hanging slightly loose on his frame. His eyes were hollow, shadowed by heavy, bloodshot bruises, as if he hadn't slept in weeks. "Chloe," he said, his voice hoarse, scraping over the syllables of my name. The knife stilled in my hand. "What are you doing here, Liam?" "I just wanted to see you." He took a step inside, his eyes devouring me as if he were a starving man. "I'm doing just fine. You don't need to trouble yourself." I turned my back on him, focusing on the vegetables with a feigned concentration I was far from feeling. "Chloe, wait. Please." His voice was desperate. He moved closer, and before I could react, his hand closed around my wrist. "Can we talk? Please just talk." I yanked my hand away as if burned. "Talk? What is left to talk about? Liam, we're divorced. It's over." "I know," he said, closing his eyes as if in physical pain. When he opened them, they were swimming with a torment that, a month ago, would have shattered me. "Chloe, I was wrong. I know that now. Please, Give me another chance. I let out a laugh, a harsh, brittle sound that held no humor. Give you another chance? So you can kick me out again the next time Maya snaps her fingers? No thank you. No I won't, he said urgently, his hands clenching at his sides. I've broken it off with her. It's over. That gave me pause. I was genuinely surprised. You broke up with her? He nodded, a muscle ticking in his jaw. She's pregnant. The air left my lungs. So that was it. The final piece of the puzzle. But the child, he continued, the words seeming to cause him physical pain, isn't mine. And when I found out, all I could think about was you. I realized what a fool I've been. I can't forget you, Chloe. Please, let's get back together. We can start over. I looked at him, at the man I had loved with every fiber of my being for 3 years, and all I felt was a deep, overwhelming sense of irony. He wasn't here because he loved me. He was here because he'd been humiliated. I was his consolation prize. Liam, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Do you really think I'm some kind of fool who comes and goes at your convenience? That I'm just sitting here, waiting for you to realize my worth after you've been discarded by your precious Maya? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I stared at him, my gaze as cold as the day he'd thrown me out. You left me for her without a second thought. Now that she's turned out to be a lying, pregnant disappointment, you come crawling back to me. What am I to you? Your backup plan? Your safe harbor? His face turned a sickly shade of pale. No. You're the woman I love. Get out, I snapped, pointing the knife I was still holding toward the door. My hand was steady. I don't ever want to see you again, Liam. Get out. Just then the front door opened. Kale stood there, having come home for lunch. The moment his eyes landed on Liam, the temperature in the room dropped by 20 degrees. His face, usually so controlled, darkened with a storm of pure, unadulterated fury. What? He asked, his voice a low, deadly whisper. Are you doing here? The air in the kitchen crackled with a volatile energy, a three-way standoff charged with past betrayal and present possession. Liam, for his part, didn't back down. He straightened his shoulders, his own hostility rising to meet Kale's. This is between me and Chloe, Liam said, his tone bristling. It's none of your business. Kale took a step forward, his movement fluid and predatory. He didn't even glance at me. His entire focus was on the man he considered a trespasser. She is my wife, he stated flatly, moving to stand slightly in front of me, a human shield. Everything about her is my business. If you dare bother her again, don't blame me for what happens next. Your wife. Liam let out a mocking, bitter laugh. Kale, Vance, don't think I'm an idiot. Don't think everyone on this base is an idiot. You and Chloe are only married on paper. It's a transaction. A revenge plot. Can you honestly stand there and tell me you have real feelings for her? Kale looked like he had just heard the most ridiculous joke in the world. A cold, dangerous smile played on his lips. My feelings, he repeated, his voice dropping to a silken, menacing purr. You're in no position to question how I feel. Then, without a single word of warning, he turned, cupped my face in his hands and kissed me. It was nothing like the chaste, performative kiss at the Civil Affairs Bureau. This was forceful, scorching, and overwhelming. It was a kiss of possession, of punishment, of raw, undeniable claim. His lips were soft yet demanding, and the faint taste of tobacco and coffee was intoxicating. I was so completely stunned that I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My hands, still holding the stupid vegetable knife, hung limply at my sides. The world narrowed to the pressure of his mouth on mine, the scent of him filling my senses, the solid warmth of his body against me. Liam made a strangled sound. Kale, let her go. He rushed toward us, his face a mask of crimson rage, intent on pulling us apart. But Kale only tightened his arm around my waist, pulling me flush against him, and deepened the kiss. It was a blatant, open challenge. It was Kale Vance drawing a line in the sand with Liam Hayes on the wrong side of it. Only when I was genuinely lightheaded, my knees weak, did he finally break the kiss, his breath warm against my flushed cheek. He turned his head, his eyes locking with Liam's, his expression one of pure, unadulterated defiance. He was still holding me tightly, my back pressed against his chest. See that? Kale's voice was rough, a little breathless. That's how real my feelings are. Liam trembled, pointing a shaking finger at us. You. What about us? Kale said, a smug, triumphant grin spreading across his face. He was enjoying this. He was enjoying shattering Liam's last remaining hope. We're legally married. Being affectionate with my wife isn't a crime, is it? Or are you just jealous that she kisses me back? That was the final killing blow. Liam looked from Kale's triumphant face to my own, which I knew was flushed and dazed. He was so furious he was rendered speechless. With one last venomous glare that promised this wasn't over, he turned on his heel and stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. The moment he was gone, the fierce tension in Kale's body eased. He released me, taking a small step back. "Did that scare you?" he asked, his voice returning to its usual calm cadence. I snapped out of my daze, my heart still hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My lips tingled. I could still feel the ghost of his kiss. "No," I replied, my own voice quiet but steady. "Good," he said simply. "If he bothers you again, just come straight to me." He then turned and walked toward the study as if he hadn't just upended my entire emotional world. I nodded, though my heart was a complete chaotic mess. That night I lay in bed, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. My mind kept circling back to that kiss. The feel of his lips, the strength of his arms, the raw, masculine scent of him. My face heated in the darkness just thinking about it. It hadn't felt like part of a transaction. It felt real. Just then a soft knock came at the door. "You still awake?" It was Kale's voice. My heart jumped into my throat. Before I could formulate a response, he pushed the door open and came in, holding a cup of warm brown sugar water. "It's your time of the month, right?" he asked, his tone a little awkward, as if he wasn't quite sure how to navigate this particular intimacy. I was momentarily stunned. He remembered. I hadn't expected him to keep track of something like that. "Thank you," I said, my voice soft as I accepted the cup. The warmth seeped into my hands, a soft counterpoint to the heat still simmering in my blood from the memory of his kiss. "I'm sorry about earlier," he suddenly said. I looked up at him, confused. "For what?" "The kiss," he clarified, shoving his hands in his pockets, clearly embarrassed. "I didn't mean to be disrespectful. I didn't want him to think he still had a chance. I wanted to end it." Seeing this powerful, feared man looking so flustered over a kiss sent a wave of unexpected tenderness through me. I couldn't help but smile. "I know. You're not mad." I shook my head. "No." He let out a sigh of relief I don't think he even knew he was holding. Then he muttered under his breath, almost too low for me to hear, "Honestly, I've wanted to do that for a long time." I blinked, sure I had misheard. "What?" He looked up, meeting my gaze directly, his embarrassment replaced by a startling sincerity. "Ever since the day Liam and I became rivals, I've been paying attention to him. And naturally to you. I saw how good you were to him. How you stood by him. He was a damn fool who didn't know how to cherish you." He took a step closer, his dark eyes holding mine captive. "Lucky for me, you're mine now." My face flushed a bright, burning red. My heart was pounding again, but this time with a wild, hopeful, terrifying joy. Was that a confession? From that day on, something fundamental shifted between us. The deliberate distance we had maintained evaporated. He'd hold my hand when we walked together, his thumbs stroking absent circles on my skin. He'd straighten my collar before we went out, his fingers brushing against my neck, sending shivers down my spine. And I, in turn, began to grow not just accustomed to his nearness, but to crave it. I stopped flinching at his touch and instead leaned into it. I began to look forward to the simple domestic rituals of our life together. That weekend he took me to visit his family's old estate. I had braced myself for a battlefield, for a cold reception from Eleanor Vance. But to my stunned surprise, her attitude had done a complete 180. It was clear Kale had spoken to her, and whatever he had said, it had worked. She held my hand, her grip firm, and asked about my well-being with a genuine concern that felt alien coming from her. She fussed over me, insisting I have more tea, more pastries, her earlier venom replaced by a cautious, almost warm curiosity. "Nah," she said, using the nickname Kale had apparently given me in their private conversations. "When are you and Kale planning to give me a grandchild? You're not getting any younger, you know." My face instantly flamed. I looked down at my lap, my throat tight. The old, familiar dread coiled in my stomach. "Mom, there's no rush," Kale interjected smoothly, coming to my rescue. He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. We're planning to enjoy a couple of years together, just the two of us, before we even think about kids. A couple of years? Mrs. Vance shot him a glare. You're not getting any younger and you're still talking about enjoying a couple of years? She then turned her formidable attention back to me. Let me tell you this. By next year I must be holding my grandchild. I lowered my head further, unable to meet her eyes. A dull, familiar ache settled deep in my chest. If she knew the truth, if she knew I might be barren, would this newfound warmth vanish? Would I once again be the unsuitable, flawed woman who wasn't good enough for her son? When we left the Vance family estate later that evening, my mood was heavy, the joy from the day overshadowed by the shadow of my secret. Kale, perceptive as always, didn't miss my silence. Don't listen to my mom, he said, his hand finding mine on the car seat between us. His fingers laced through mine, a simple, grounding gesture. When it comes to kids, we'll just go with the flow. No pressure. I nodded, squeezing his hand in gratitude, but my heart was still a tangled, anxious knot. He was being so perfect, so understanding. It only made the secret I carried feel heavier, a betrayal of the trust that was slowly blooming between us. The peace we had built felt fragile in the days that followed the visit to the Vance estate. Kale's words were a comfort, but his mother's expectation hung over me like a shroud. I threw myself into making the villa a home, trying to lose my anxieties in the simple acts of cleaning, cooking, and arranging. Kale noticed my quiet tension but seemed to understand I needed space, offering silent support through his steady presence. It was during one of these quiet afternoons that the phone rang, its shrill tones slicing through the calm. I picked it up, my hello, cautious. Chloe. It's Maya. Her voice was sharp, unpleasant, devoid of its usual fake sweetness. Come outside. I'm waiting for you at the cafe across the street. My grip tightened on the receiver. I have nothing to say to you, Maya. We have plenty to talk about, she hissed. Unless you're too much of a coward to face me. I knew it was a trap. I knew nothing good could come from this. But a stubborn, angry part of me refused to let her think she could intimidate me. I had run from her once. I wouldn't do it again. Fine, I said coldly. 5 minutes. I found her sitting at a corner table by the window, her makeup impeccably applied, a cup of untouched coffee in front of her. But she couldn't hide the deep-seated exhaustion in her eyes, the faint lines of stress around her mouth. The glamour was cracking. What do you want? I asked, not bothering to sit down. She looked up at me, her eyes narrowed. Emma, talk to Liam for me. I let out a disbelieving laugh. You've got to be joking. You steal my husband, destroy my marriage, and now you want me to help you win him back? Why don't you go to hell? Her face twisted, the mask of civility shattering. You ungrateful little, she snapped, then caught herself, lowering her voice to a venomous whisper. Just because you married Kale Vance, you think you're safe now? You think you've won? Let me tell you, no one in the Vance family is going to accept a barren hen like you. The world stopped. The air was sucked from my lungs. The background noise of the cafe faded into a dull roar. My stomach plummeted as if I'd stepped off a cliff. How? I stammered, my voice a dry rasp. How do you know? She smirked, a smug, cruel expression that made my skin crawl. If you want to keep secrets, you'd better be better at hiding them. You really thought you'd tucked that diagnosis away so well? I knew from the start. I went through your things when you were out. The violation was so profound it left me breathless. She had been in my most private spaces, touching my most private fears. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. So you told Liam? I asked, my voice trembling with a fury so pure it was blinding. Of course I did, she said, not even trying to deny it. He deserved to know the truth. That you're a liar. That you're not good enough for him. That you're broken. I was shaking, my whole body trembling with rage. You're despicable, Maya. She leaned back in her seat, a cruel, triumphant smile playing on her lips. Despicable? Please, Chloe. You're still too green, too naive to go up against someone like me. I didn't care whether Liam knew or not. It had nothing to do with him anymore. He had made his choice based on his love for her, not on my fertility. But looking at Maya's twisted, gloating expression, knowing the depth of her malice, made my stomach churn with a violent nausea. Without another thought, I reached for the full cup of coffee in front of her. In one fluid, furious motion, I flung the dark, lukewarm liquid directly into her face. She shrieked, coffee dripping from her hair, her nose, onto her expensive silk blouse. "Maya, listen carefully," I said, my voice low and colder than I had ever heard it. I leaned over the table, my eyes locked on her shocked, dripping face. "Even if it kills me, I will never, ever bow down to someone like you." And with that, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving her sputtering and humiliated in the middle of the cafe. I held my head high, my back straight, until I was out of her sight. The moment I stepped back into the quiet solitude of the villa, the bravado evaporated. The shock, the violation, the raw hatred, it all crashed down on me at once. I collapsed to the floor in the entryway, my legs giving way. I wrapped my arms around myself and finally let it out. I cried. I sobbed uncontrollably, great heaving sobs that tore from my chest until it ached. I cried for the betrayal, for the humiliation, for the secret that was now a weapon in the hands of my enemy. I cried for the peace that had been so brutally shattered. I didn't hear Kale come home. I just felt his presence. He didn't say a word. He didn't ask what was wrong. He simply walked over, knelt down on the floor beside me, and wrapped his arms tightly around me, pulling me into the solid, safe harbor of his chest. "Let it out," he whispered into my hair, his hand making slow, soothing circles on my back. "You'll feel better after you cry." And so I did. I buried my face in his shirt, ruining it with my tears, and cried out every last bit of pain, humiliation, and bitterness I had buried in my heart for months. I cried until I had no tears left, until the storm of my emotions finally began to subside, leaving me spent and hollow in his arms. When my sobs had quieted to shaky hiccups, I pulled back, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," I mumbled, wiping at my tear-streaked face. "I ruined your shirt." "Dummy," he said gently, his voice rough with emotion. He reached out and tapped the tip of my nose, a gesture so tender it made my heart ache. "It's just a shirt. You matter more than anything else." I looked up at him, my vision blurry, my heart so full of a confusing mix of anguish and warmth it felt like it might burst. "Kale, He cut me off softly. "Maya came to see you, didn't she?" I nodded, fresh tears welling. There was no point in hiding it. I told him everything word for word, my voice trembling. I told him about her going through my things, about her knowing the diagnosis, about her telling Liam, about her cruel taunts. As he listened, his expression darkened. The gentle concern in his eyes was replaced by a glacial coldness, a look of such deadly intent that it should have frightened me. But it didn't. It made me feel protected. "That woman," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble, "really has a death wish." "Kale, don't," I said, grabbing his arm. A sudden fear for him lanced through me. "Don't do anything impulsive. I don't want to cause you trouble. She's not worth it. She came after my wife," he stated, as if it were the most simple, fundamental law in the universe. "And I'm just supposed to sit back and do nothing?" He let out a short, harsh scoff. "If I let that happen, what kind of man would I be?" He cupped my face, his thumb wiping away a stray tear. "Don't worry. I'll handle it. My way." The very next day, shocking news rippled through the entire military compound, eclipsing all the gossip about me. Maya's father, a prominent businessman, had been abruptly arrested on charges of bribery and massive embezzlement. The evidence was overwhelming, the case moving with startling speed. The entire Sioux family empire collapsed overnight. And Maya herself, it turned out, was not just an innocent bystander. She was taken in for questioning on suspicion of being complicit, of helping to cover up her father's crimes. I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that this was Kale's doing. He had defended me. Not with fists or shouting, but with a quiet, ruthless strategic strike that destroyed the source of her power and prestige. He had avenged me without saying a word to me about his plans. My heart was profoundly touched, but a new, different trouble took root. His power was awe-inspiring, but it also highlighted my own vulnerability. I was becoming a liability, a source of conflict that required him to wield his influence in dangerous ways. The weight of my secret, my perceived inadequacy, felt heavier than ever. I loved him for what he had done, but I hated that I had needed him to do it. That night, after a silent, tense dinner, I went to him as he sat reading in his study. My hands were clenched, my courage a fragile thing. "We need to talk," I said, my voice barely audible. He looked up, marking his place in the book. What is it? I took a deep, shuddering breath, summoning every ounce of strength I had left. Let's get a divorce. The silence that followed my words was absolute, so profound I could hear the frantic beating of my own heart. Kale's face, which had been relaxed in concentration, hardened instantly. The air in the study grew thick and cold. What? He said, his voice dangerously quiet. Did you just say? I forced myself to meet his gaze, though every instinct screamed at me to look away. I said, let's get a divorce. The words felt like shards of glass in my throat. I can't have children, Kale. No. I don't want to drag you down. You deserve a real wife, a real family. Drag me down. He let out a cold, disbelieving laugh that held no humor. He stood up slowly, his height suddenly intimidating. He walked around the desk until he was standing right in front of me. Is that what you think of me, Chloe? That I'm the kind of man who would abandon his wife, the woman he loves, because of something like that? But. No buts. He cut me off, his voice rising, laced with a raw pain I had never heard from him before. He grabbed my shoulders, his grip firm but not painful. Listen to me. From the moment you married me, you became my wife. Not for a contract, not for revenge. My wife. In this life, in the next, and the one after that, you will always be my wife. Do you understand me? Tears spilled from my eyes, streaming down my face unchecked. But your mother, the family name, the pressure. My mother, he said, his tone firm and unwavering, is not the one I married. She will learn to be happy with the choices I have made and the woman I have chosen. End of discussion. He pulled me tightly into his arms, crushing me against his chest. I could feel the frantic, angry beat of his heart. So don't you ever think about leaving me. Don't you dare. I broke then, sobbing into his shirt for the second time in as many days. But this time the tears were of relief, of a profound, soul-deep release. The heavy chain of my secret, the fear of being a burden, shattered and fell away under the sheer force of his declaration. Why are you so good to me, Kale? I whispered, my voice muffled against his chest. Because I love you. The 3 words were simple, clear, and they settled into the deepest part of me, filling every crack and hollow that had been carved by loss and betrayal. He loved me. Me, Chloe. With all my flaws, with my past, with my uncertain future. He lowered his head and kissed me. Not like the fierce, possessive kiss meant for Liam's eyes. Not like the gentle, comforting kisses of the past few weeks. This kiss was tender, deep, and full of a reverence that stole my breath. It was a promise. It was a confession. It was a new beginning. I closed my eyes and kissed him back, pouring all my gratitude, all my newfound love, all my hope into the kiss. And I knew with a certainty that eclipsed everything else, that I had truly, completely, and irrevocably fallen in love with my husband. Later, Kale went to speak with his mother alone. I never asked what he said to her, what arguments he used, what truths he laid bare. But after that day, Eleanor Vance never mentioned children or grandchildren to me again. In fact, her attitude underwent a final, permanent thaw. She began to treat me not just with acceptance, but with a genuine, if somewhat formal, affection. She told me during one of our now regular visits, children are a matter of fate. If you and Kale are blessed with one, that is wonderful. If not, it does not matter. A family is built on love and respect. As long as you two are happy, nothing else is more important. When I looked at her kind, smiling face, my heart filled with a gratitude so immense it brought fresh tears to my eyes. The dragon had not just been tamed, she had been won over. Kale had built a fortress around our marriage and I was safe inside it. Sometime later, Liam came to see me one last time. He found me in the courtyard, tending to the small rose bushes Kale had planted for me. He looked broken, the proud colonel reduced to a shell of a man. He didn't speak. He simply knelt in the gravel before me, his head bowed. Chloe, he said, his voice thick with tears. I was wrong. I know that now. I regret everything. I'm willing to give up my rank, my position, everything, just for a chance to have you back. I looked down at him, the man who had once been my entire world, and I felt nothing but a distant pity. There was no love, no hate, not even anger. Just the quiet acknowledgement of a path not taken, a lesson painfully learned. Liam, I said, my voice calm and clear. There's no going back. The past is past. I looked toward the house where I knew Kale was waiting for me. A soft, genuine smile touched my lips. I already have my happiness. I hope you find yours. Then I turned and walked away, back toward the villa, back toward my life, without a single backward glance. I was finally completely free. The year that followed was the happiest of my life. The shadows of the past receded, replaced by the bright, steady light of Kale's love. Our marriage, born from a transaction, had become the most real and solid thing I had ever known. We were a team, partners in every sense of the word. The compound's gossip about us slowly died, replaced by a respectful acknowledgement of the obvious. Captain Vance was utterly devoted to his wife and she to him. I stopped thinking about the diagnosis. Kale's words had truly freed me from its burden. We were happy and that was enough. So when I started feeling unusually tired, when the smell of Kale's morning coffee suddenly made my stomach turn, I dismissed it as stress or a passing bug. But the fatigue and nausea persisted. A prickle of something, not quite hope, not quite fear, made me buy a test from a pharmacy far from the prying eyes of the compound. I took it home, my hands shaking, my heart a wild drum in my chest. When the 2 pink lines appeared, clear and undeniable, I sank to the bathroom floor, the plastic stick clattering from my fingers. I stared at it, disbelief and a joy so fierce it was almost painful warring inside me. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. A fresh wave of panic sent me to a different doctor, a specialist in the city, my secret clutched tightly in my hand. Kale, concerned by my pale face, wanted to come, but I begged him to let me go alone. I needed to know for sure before I shattered the peaceful world we had built. The doctor, a kind-faced older woman, reviewed the new tests and the old diagnosis. She shook her head. A misdiagnosis, she said gently. It happens more often than you'd think. Especially with less sophisticated equipment. There is absolutely no reason you can't have children, Mrs. Vance. In fact, according to these results, you are already about 6 weeks pregnant. I held the new correct medical report in my hands, the paper crisp and definitive. Tears streamed down my face, but they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. The old, crumpled diagnosis that had haunted me for so long was just a piece of paper, a monument to a fear that was now obsolete. I practically ran home, bursting through the front door. Kale was in the living room, his brow furrowed with worry the moment he saw my tear-streaked face. "Chloe? What's wrong? What did the doctor say?" I couldn't speak. I just walked over to him, threw my arms around his neck and pressed the new report into his hand, sobbing against his shoulder. He held me, his body tense with concern as he scanned the paper. I felt the exact moment he understood. His entire body went still. Then a shudder went through him. He pulled back, his hands cradling my face, his own eyes shining with unshed tears. Is this real?" he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. I nodded, laughing and crying at the same time. "It was a mistake, Kale. All this time, it was a mistake." A sound escaped him then, a laugh of pure, unbridled wonder and relief. He hugged me so tightly my feet left the ground, spinning me around in the middle of our living room. "I knew it," he laughed, the sound rich and joyful like that of a child who had been given the world. "I knew my wife was the best." The news spread through the compound, this time as a story of happy wonder. The Vance family was expecting. Eleanor was over the moon, her earlier demands forgotten in the sheer delight of the impending arrival. She fussed over me more than ever, her dragon's heart seemingly melted into goo. 10 months later, after a pregnancy that was thankfully smooth, I gave birth in a military hospital, Kale's hand a constant grounding presence in mine. And in a final breathtaking twist of fate, we were blessed with 2 perfect squalling infants, a boy and a girl. Our son was the spitting image of Kale, with a shock of dark hair and a fierce, determined little brow. Our daughter, the doctor said, had my eyes. Seeing the 2 little angels with their rosy cheeks and tiny, perfect fingers, my heart felt so full I thought it would surely burst with the force of my love. Kale Vance, the man once feared as the most ruthless officer in the district, became famously wife-whipped and a total girl dad. Every day after work, the first thing he did was rush home, still in his uniform, to scoop up our daughter, cooing nonsense to her, while our son would be contentedly tucked in the crook of my arm. The sight of the formidable Captain Vance gently rocking a baby and singing off-key lullabies became a common and beloved one in our little villa. He was the gentlest, most loving husband and father I could ever have imagined. And I, Chloe Vance, who had once been thrown out into the snow with a torn-up marriage certificate and a broken heart, had at last found the happiness that was truly, completely and wonderfully my own. Our story hadn't been a simple one. It was forged in betrayal, tempered in a pact of convenience and ultimately strengthened by a love that proved powerful enough to overcome any secret, any enemy and any mistaken diagnosis. We had built our future not on a foundation of paper, but on one of unwavering choice and fierce, protective love. The end.